talk briefly about the 6 classes of nutrients, and which as a C2 you have to name. As the HB, you also have to discuss those and be able to point them out on the feed label as well. So we will then kind of transition into talking about deciphering a feed label. And then from there, we'll go ahead and just look at those feed samples to identify which is great for you guys as HB, those taking the HB, and then also quiz, because that's a topic for quiz this year, is that you may have to identify grains in hay. So, okay. All right, so how we're going to start out is we're going to just go ahead and list off those 6 classes of nutrients and talk a little bit about those. Opening up to my, so go ahead and you can, I'm not set up to, let's see. Okay, you can either just go ahead and unmute yourself and everyone can kind of say a class of nutrient if you know one, and we'll just go down the line.
Proteins.
Proteins, good.
Carbohydrates.
Good.
Fiber.
Fiber is part of your carbohydrates. So, but that's an important part of that. Go ahead. Anyone else?
Fats.
Fats. Good.
Vitamins.
Good. Anyone else got any more?
Water, if it hasn't been said already.
Yes. Yes, water. Good. And
minerals.
Yeah, good. Okay. All right. So we'll just did we say fats? That was not said. Good. Okay, I think we got them all now. All right, so we'll just go through those briefly and talk a little bit about kind of what those are. Who can tell me a little bit about water? Why is it important or whatnot? If
Well,
it's not
I
obvious.
say like it's the most important nutrient.
Yeah. Yeah. So water is the essential part of every cell and all of the vital fluids that support the cell, so including the blood. And this is what helps carry the nutrients. So it is kind of you can think of it as kind of the top part there. And obviously lack of water, they call it, is dehydration. So, and all of that is fairly serious. In the last meeting that we had, we briefly talked about how water, the importance of water is in the digestive tract, and how serious it is to have any decrease for like a horse. Does anyone remember what percentage I said that was fatal? I didn't even write it down. So if anyone wrote it down, it seemed like a very brief amount there.
I think it was like 15.
Yeah, it was like 15% loss of water is fatal. So that's how important it is to have it in the digestive tract. And does anyone remember what part of the digestive tract the kind of remainder of the water is absorbed from what they're digesting?
I think it's the small colon.
Yes. Good. Okay. All right. So then we'll go ahead and go on to carbohydrates. What can anyone tell me about carbohydrates?
They give the horse energy.
Yep. Good. So it makes up most of the fuel that a horse uses for energy. Where are carbohydrates found?
Grains and roughage.
Yep. Hays, grains, pasture grasses, all what your horse should mainly eating is a lot and pasture grass. And a lot the carbs also point for this time of year that it helps keep your horse's body just normal and regulated. So especially in the cold weather, that's why they say don't put an extra blanket on, give extra flakes of hay, because that the carbohydrates in the hay and that kind of fuels the body's ability to be able to keep its temperature up. Okay. Let's skip on to proteins. What can anyone tell me about proteins?
They break down into amino acids.
Yes, proteins are made up of the long chains of amino acids. They're the building blocks of life. So what kind of the key word there? They're essential to every cell in the body and need for growth, maintenance, and repair of the tissues. So that's an important thing to kind of jot down with the proteins. And if you think of as we're working them, you need protein to help build muscle and all of that. That's important. So in your building up and working your horses and conditioning them, proteins and having an adequate amount is important. And it's also too, as we go through proteins and fats, it's important to evaluate the quality. So we'll touch on that a little bit, but it's more quality over quantity. So when you're selecting a grain, you want to make sure when you're looking through the feed label that they have quality sources of proteins. Okay, all right, so let's go on to fats. What can anyone tell me about fat?
They're more of a long-lasting energy source than carbs are.
Okay, good. What does anyone know what they're also known as? There's another name for them.
Lipids.
Yeah, good. Lipids, often referred to as lipids. So they play an important role. It is like a longer energy source. They affect the skin and the coat condition, but also are a major component of the outer layer of the cell. And they're also a part of the absorption of fat soluble vitamins. Hopefully you guys can't hear that in the background. I hope there's not like a lot of background noise going on my end. So hopefully it's not too loud. Okay. And the other kind of key thing to jot down with the fats is that it's considered a cool calories. Some horses behave better when they're fed additional calories from fat than they do when fed just grain-based, carbohydrate-based. So that's an interesting thing to kind of consider when you're balancing your horse's diet. All right, next is vitamins. What can you guys tell me about vitamins?
They're important for your immune system and growth.
Good. Okay. There's two types of vitamins. Does anyone know what those are?
Fat soluble and water soluble.
Yes. Good. Try to see if there's anything else on here that I wanted to say about that. Yeah, fat soluble, which is what we talked about, the importance of fats. Does anyone by chance know, there's a shorter list of fat soluble vitamins. Does anyone know what they are?
D, A, and E.
Yep, D, A, E, and one more.
K.
Okay, good. And each of those obviously have a very specific thing that they help with the body. There's kind of can anyone give me what some of the water soluble ones are? General, like either the general, it's a longer list, but if you just say it in general.
The C vitamins and then the B complex vitamins.
Yeah, so you can either, there's like the whole list of B vitamins. But if you just say your C and B, and then choline is listed on there too. Good. All right, so those, we're not going to go too much in depth of what each of those ones are, but you can kind of on your own go back and go through those in a little bit more detail. Minerals, what can we say about minerals?
They just like help regulate the bodily functions of the horse.
Yeah. So they are important for the body functions, anything from enzymes to within the cell, maintaining the skeleton, all of those types of things. And there's a long list of minerals that you can kind of go into. Does anyone know where the majority of horses' minerals are provided by?
Roughage.
Yeah, their forage source. And then the importance becomes, what again? And with minerals, or what was I saying? Okay, with the forages, what is then important to make sure you do in your area?
Make sure you have good quality roughage and forage.
Yes, and how can you, what's something that you can do to ensure that your forage has adequate levels?
Yes.
Yeah, soil test. You can have your hay to have a hay sample evaluated. But soil testing is a big one. And usually there's certain regions you can get that information of, like typically certain areas are lower in some minerals than others, and then you can supplement your horse's feed. Okay. All right, so just going back over. So our types of nutrients: water, carbs, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is take out our feed labels and have those handy. I'm going to go ahead and screen share for this part. There is a rubric, and then there's also this little cheat sheet that we're going to look at to help you evaluate a feed label. Let's see what we got going on here. Okay, so if you log into your Pony Club website, you go to C level, HB, or whatever, click on the standards parts, and that's when you can see the test sheets, checklists. I think that what we're looking for, you find through the national level certifications. And if you go to HB and then click on the standards, okay, there, yeah, you see the checklist down the side. So that is where, and I think if I click on specifically, nope, That's not what I wanted. If I go back to, if you click on the national level certifications and you get this HB part, the thing that we're going to be mostly listening to or looking at is in the supplemental materials. And then you go down to the feed label, and that's gives us a little bit more information for the C2 and the HB regarding the feed label. So, all right, so as C2s looking at the feed label, you need to be able to identify what the percentage of protein and fat is. And then from the ingredient list, you'll identify one source of carbohydrate, vitamin, and mineral. And then you guys that are doing the HB, you'll look at the feed label and identify the sources of proteins, carbs, and fats. And you actually have to bring your own labels, which is great because then you're pretty so then you are pretty well prepared to talk about that ahead of time. So, all right, so go ahead and get out your, go ahead and get out your feed label and take a look at that real quick. Okay. All right. So sorry guys. I'm gonna have to take like a little mini gather our situation here. So if you can go ahead and with your feed label, and if you don't have one in front of you, look one up online real quick. And I'd like you to go ahead and identify the percentages, which it should actually just be very straightforward and say that on your feed label. But I'd also like you to go ahead and try to take a guess at picking out one of each of the following classes of nutrients, obviously minus the water. So even you guys that are C2s that only have to pick out like a few of those things, go ahead and circle, write down, and try to pick out a protein, a fat, a carb, a vitamin and mineral if they have that available on your thing. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to go ahead and do that. And once you kind of gather that information, go ahead and put it in the chat what your feed label is, like what type of grain, and then listing off your guess of what each item is. And then we'll review each one of those, and I have a few samples for you guys. So go ahead and just take like 5 minutes to do that. Okay, so does someone want to go ahead and share their?
So I use Purina Enrich Plus, which which is added to just oats for our horses, and it's mainly protein, so it's plant protein products. For the carbohydrate, I had forage products. For the fats, I had soybean oil. For vitamins, I had vitamin B12 and D3 and minerals as salt.
Great, and that is actually one of the ones that I'll pull that label up so we can all look at it on there. So all right, so someone else who does something that's not enriched. So we won't double share. So does someone else have something different?
I use Tribute Calm Ultra, and I just did the ones that I have to find. I did for protein, I have wheat nidlings. For carbs, I have beet pulp, and for fats, I have flaxseed oil.
Awesome. And that is actually another one too. I have that label. So we'll look at those two and kind of pick those out for my examples. All right. So who else has something different?
I use Sentinel Active Senior Performance Feed, and for protein, I had soybean hulls. For carbohydrate, I had wheat flour, and then fats, I had soybean oil.
Good. And that's actually one of our feed samples that I'll bring up too. Go ahead. Next person.
Review calm and easy pellets. Crude protein minimum 14%. Crude fat minimum 8%.
Good. Okay. And again, some of these too, you guys will see that like as when we're talking about ingredients, some of them are I pulled up this example that they have on the Pony Club website. And it actually some of these, as you'll see, like rice bran is listed in 2 places. Actually, all 3 is a source of protein, carbs, and fats. And I'll show you too from my feed label how that kind of works out that way. So it's figuring out what and as things are listed on the ingredient statement, that's in order of usually how like the amount and the prominence in the label. Okay, does anyone else want to share what type of feed that they have? If not, we'll kind of go ahead and look at some of the other labels. Okay, and you guys, we can chime in too if later as we're going. Keeping up with the chat is a little hard to see when I'm on the screen share. Okay, so here they have the Pony Club senior feed. And so the things that you're looking at when you're evaluating a feed label is the guaranteed analysis, the ingredients, but it's also important to know where it's sourced, and the feeding instructions, right? So those are all kind of pieces that we're going to look at on a feed label. For those of you that are going for your seed, it's most important to look at guaranteed analysis and the ingredient statement. For you guys going for your HA, it is important and things like that to know about kind of the availability and the cost and whatnot that goes into that feed. So here, go ahead and look at this label, and who can tell me what the amount of protein is that's located in feed?
%.
Good. Okay, what about fat?
8%.
Good. Okay. And so then we kind of look over where it says the sources. So they give us all and they highlight the primary source of each of those things. So that's kind of helpful for us because there's a long list of ingredients down here. The feeding directions and the location of where it's sourced. But since there's such a long list, it kind of points out which ones are the main sources. So our sources of protein, as it says over on the side, it gives you kind of three main ones, and then it gives you the extra, kind of the lesser protein sources, maybe not the most efficient protein sources. And then goes down into carbohydrates and fats. So for you guys that are taking your C2 and HB, you get to bring your label and can kind of go through and highlight, circle, star, whatever, what are the main sources of each of these things to talk about. So that kind of makes it easy for you. And then you're also talking about your feed that, you know, you may feed your horse or is common in the area. So this is the Pony Club one, and they list all the vitamins and minerals that are added in as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and skip on over to some of the real feed labels that I pulled up. Some of these are from labels that we'll look at too. So Maxi Glow, that's a common brand for rice bran pellets. And what I'll do here is hopefully you guys can see this. I'm going to try to zoom in so that we can see maybe I'll zoom in. There we go. And see, it gives us feeding directions, but then we're going to kind of look up here at this guaranteed analysis and the ingredient list. So this is one of those feeds that, and much like the oats, which were next, where it is like, but we're getting the analysis of what that is within those pellets itself, and it does have an additive in there. So as you can see, when you're looking at this analysis of just the rice bran pellets, it's got protein in there and the fat, and then it breaks it down in the fibers and all of those the vitamin mineral additives. But you can see it's got a huge percentage of fat that's in this, which is why when we were looking at the previous label, it wasn't listed as one of the main sources of protein, but it's one of the main sources of fat, even though it is bringing protein to the table on this. All right, so I'm going to zoom back out. This is like for the, oh, there we go. So the whole and steamed crimped oats, that's another one that we can look at, and there's a sample kit. and it breaks it down for you too. So percentage of protein, fat, and fiber. And so in this, fiber being part of like our carbohydrate source is kind of the main component here. It brings some fat, it brings some protein in, but it has a majority of the fiber there. And then when you look at the ingredient list, it is just oats, whole oats, and then steamed oats. So this one, we already talked about, someone shared about the Enrich Plus. What is this feed considered? What type of feed is this considered?
A ration balancer?
Right, a ration balancer. So what that means is you're only going to small amount of it, right? You're not giving a huge 3 pound, like a 3/4, 3 pound scoop of this twice a day. It's the smaller amount, and that is noted. It's not noted on these directions, but it's supposed to on the back of these. It says it'll give you kind of like directions of like horses that are in maintenance, horses that are in heavy work, and it'll tell you about how much you should be giving. And this is mostly, as you look at the top, protein with a little fat, little bit of fiber. Who can tell me from this list what the protein, a fat, and a carbohydrate source? We already talked about it, but if you weren't listening, into information, or you can take from what I believe Lydia was the one who shared. One protein, one fat, one carbohydrate source. What can you guys see in there?
A protein could be the soybean hulls, and then a fat, the soybean oil, and then carbohydrate could be the wheat middlings.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so any of the oils in there are going to be fats. It even says plant protein products, so whatever that would be, that would obviously contribute to the proteins too. Yeah, it's a little bit of a mix of stuff, and there's tons of vitamins and minerals that are located down there below that you can, any one of those you could list off for you guys for the HB. The list one, I think, did I say C2s also have to put one as well? Good. Okay. This label is a little harder to read, so we'll pass that. I'll send this out for you guys to look at. And you can just spend time kind of Google different feeds and come with some different things to look at. So for our C2, who, one of you guys that your next rating could be C2, or even if you're a D level, someone let me know what they see as the protein for this label, which is a seniority textured, which is a tribute feed. So on the guaranteed analysis, locate the protein source.
What's the protein source? Okay, it's wheat middlings.
Or what's a protein percentage? Sorry. What's a protein percentage that you see on the analysis?
You see it?
So,
Can't see it on it. It's not showing the whole thing. I'm guessing it's 514, but I can't see it.
I don't think that your screen's showing the right thing.
is it not?
I think we're still on
It
the
needs to go up.
other one.
Oh, got it. Hold on.
No, don't flip around. Just wait. Wait for her. Honey, no, you can't see it at all.
I'll fix
Done.
it. Somehow it's paused. Thank you for that. Right, seniority textured.
What was the question? Protein percentage?
Yeah, what is the protein percentage for this?
14%.
14. Good. And who can find the fat?
6%.
Good. Good. All right. Now scroll down to the ingredient list there. You have to have good eyes. It's a little blurry. Okay. All right. Someone find a carbohydrate source in the ingredient.
The shredded beet pulp.
Good. Any other ones you see in there?
Cane molasses.
Good. And can someone point out a fat?
Soybeans?
The soybean oil would be good. And what about, what haven't we called out? Protein?
Protein would be soybeans.
Yep. Good. Awesome. So, let's see where we're at time-wise here. All right, so I have a couple other labels, but you pretty much have a good hold on picking out each of those items. So again, if you haven't already done this on your own label, go through and you highlight, circle, star, whatever you like, knowing that some of those are like we talked about with the rice bran pellets, they kind of fit into multiple categories. So I'll back over to back out and go over to the website again. Let's see. Definitely pull this up if you guys have not seen that. If you don't know where to find it, I'll start after and I can help walk you through it again. But this helps a lot, I think, is giving you ideas of what those sources of proteins, carbs, and fat are. The vitamins and minerals, I think, are a little bit easier to point out. And also using your Pony Club manual, which they don't really talk about that until you get up into the HbA level manual. But they do talk about some of those sources specifically. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go backtrack to trying to figure out how the heck to, oh, okay. I'm a little bit, the screen sharing thing was a little bit off from I couldn't understand pausing. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and go into identifying some different grains and added haze are thrown in there too, which this is a little bit more for you guys that are doing the HP, but helpful for just any of you that are kind of looking at different samples. And like I said, for quiz, this is helpful. So at the top of this document, go ahead and scroll all the way up in different pictures of different samples. Now, if you have a sample kit that I gave out to the DC year, these are going to be in order of those samples, I'm pretty sure. I tried pretty hard to do. So we're going to go through each one and identify it and talk about some different ways that we can identify those within your grain, or just add a little bit of variations in some of them. So okay. All right, so I'm going to start with this top picture. Who can tell me what this picture is of?
Cracked corn.
Corn. So we'll see other types of corn down there. But probably this is familiar for some kind of mixed feeds that you might see. So this is cracked corn. So obviously it's just broken up into little pieces versus a whole kernel. Okay. All right. So the pellets are going to be a little bit maybe difficult to identify, especially from a picture versus seeing them in person. Does anyone have any guesses on what this pellet might be? As a hint, we've talked about it as a feed label, and it's listed as a source of carbohydrate and fat. And protein, actually.
Would it be the ration balancer?
It is not the ration balancer. It's a single type of ingredient, kind of. That gives you a hint. If anyone has any.
Like alfalfa or something?
No. I'll give anyone have a final, and then I'll give you the answer after one more guess. It was, again, one of the labels that we got. It was the first label that we talked about when I shared my screen, not the Pony Club one, but the no. Yes. All right, I'll tell you guys. That's the Rice Bran pellets. Okay, so because we're looking at a picture, it's a little different in when you see it in person. So these are pretty light colored pellets. And they kind of have a little bit of like a kind of a slightly chalky-ish appearance. But they're a lighter pellet, and that's what the rice kind of packed in. So that can be added like as a topper. A lot of people use that as kind of like toppers to their feeds, or even could be mixed into your feed. Maybe not in a pellet form, but a powder form. Okay. This one and another one that is going to be a little bit tricky, I think. Does anyone have any guess on what this is?
Rice bran.
Yeah, good. So rice bran, again, it's a little bit from the sample that I gave out in the sample kits, and in this picture it has more of like a powdery kind of appearance. Another kind of like additive into feeds. On the other bran, you'll see that has like a slightly different texture. Good. All right. What about this one?
Rolled oats.
Yeah. I think it actually technically also says rolled and crimped. If you look really closely, that has a little bit of crimping in it. But because they're totally flattened out and out of their hulls, that is that. And out of rolled, crimped, whole oats, which one does your horse get benefit from? Does anyone know?
Crimped oats.
I'd say either crimped or the rolled, because what about, does anyone know why the whole, not the whole oat?
They can't really digest it.
Yeah, it's still like it's still in there. So that kind of the crimping or the rolling action meat of the oat to allow your horse to digest it more properly. Okay. All right. Any guesses on this one here?
Alfalfa pellets.
It is it's not alfalfa pellet, although pretty good guess is, what other type of hay is in pelleted form?
Timothy pellets.
Timothy.
Yeah. So as kind of Googling both Timothy alfalfa pellets and even looking at the samples, they all vary in color. So it's a little bit difficult to identify from just without having like the label to go along with it. So I chose this one because it was a little bit of a lighter color, thinking that probably alfalfa is a much richer and kind of darker look to it. But it does depend on the type, the quality of the hay that's used for the pellet too. Okay. All right. What about this here? What is this?
Beet pulp.
Yep. Beet pulp shreds. Those can be added in to your feed. You'll see it in the feed sample, which the Altium has some beet pulp shreds in it. Some seniors have it. Some people feed it separate, soaked, all your beet pulp. If you're feeding, like if you purchase a bag of dry beet pulp shreds, you always soak it. Does anyone know why you do that?
Take the sugar out of it.
Not quite.
They don't choke on it.
Yeah, what happens when you add water to beet pulp shreds like this? What happens to the, what was that?
It soaks in the water and expands.
Yeah, it expands. So it like even like double and triple in amount. If you ever have, like we at my barn, we soak beet and feed it. You put the dry in the bucket, you fill it up to water over the top, and it can, if you have a half a bucket, it'll like almost go all the way to the top. So it expands a lot. So if you feed it dry, what happens is it gets in your horse's stomach and it expands, and either it's too much, it's, it's absorbing all that. So it can be dangerous for your horse to ingest a lot of this like dry beet pulp isn't properly soaked. Beet pulp shreds with and without molasses in it. So there's a little bit of variation. Okay. All right. Does anyone know what this is? Give you a few minutes to try to.
Selenium.
And yes. All right. So this is selenium, and it is additive. So this is something that could be added into your feed. Again, kind of this kind of powdery tank substance. Not to be confused with the rice bran, which when you're looking at the pictures, that is. Good. All right, so down here to another type of oat. Can anyone tell me what this is?
Whole oats.
Yep, it's whole oats. So if you look closely, there doesn't seem to be any crimping. They're definitely not rolled and out of their hull, out of the hull there. That is the whole oats. Okay, all right, moving on to this type of grain. Again, it gets a little tricky when you get into the pellets, because they can
Alfalfa
often
pellets.
look the same. This is not alfalfa pellets. This is a mix. It's a like a brand of feed. Multiple ingredients. Yeah, this is the ration balancer. And I'm looking for examples. I might see that the ration balancer is probably like compact pellet, because there's a lot of like the vitamin mineral kind of contents in there. So from my experience from the few ration balancers that I've seen, you might be able to identify it by it being a more compact looking pellet. And it's also not like as green like the hay, it's the alfalfa and the even the Timothy. So it is a little bit more of a kind of tan color. Good. All right. What about I put this on here because if you guys have feed samples, I was unable to add a picture of like the senior and they were all so different. So like I said, that gets a little bit tricky when you get to the pack because it's hard to say specifically like, oh yeah, that's like a senior pellet or that's like you would say like Altium or something like that. We do have a few of those in here. But probably it's like a darker pellet that you can tell is kind of made up of multiple ingredients. All right, so what is this picture here that we're looking at?
Whole
Soybeans.
soybeans.
Yep, those are whole soybeans. Very good. All right, and this next one down here.
Flaxseed.
Flax. Probably both the soybean and the flax. You're most likely going to ground up meals added to your pellets or into your grain. So we don't usually see them as like whole pieces in our grain. Maybe some of those kind of newer brands that have like the whole food blends and that kind of stuff, you may see more ingredients, but often we're seeing a lot of pellets that are being fed. Okay. All right. This one is like a specific blend. Some of you may recognize it if you feed it. If not, then we'll just kind of talk about maybe what you see in there.
Are those beet pulp strands in there?
Yeah, there's definitely some beet pulp shreds in there. What else do you guys see?
Doesn't have an alfalfa content.
Possibly included in there. It is a pretty dark pellet. We can, if you were not brand this is, you could generally call this mixed pelleted feed, right? Because we see some different stuff in there. We see some pellets, we see some beet pulp shreds. You also might notice these, see my mouse, I don't even know. There's like these kind of strange other looking pellet type things. Those are called the
What are they called again?
extruded. Okay, sorry. If you could totally mute, it's because I'm muting out the sound of the screaming baby. So bear with me, you guys. She's a little upset tonight. All right. So yeah, so this is actually though, this is Purina Altium Gastric Care, which is a mixed pelleted feed. You guys can jot that down, but if you were at quiz, most likely they would say mixed pelleted feed and not assume that you would be able to identify Altium versus Calm Ultra versus, Tribute Seniority or something like that. It would be more like you're selecting like, okay, this is a pellet. This is an extruded pellet. We'll look more at those too. or these are beet pulp shreds. So you'll get more of kind of single ingredients versus expected to know like okay, all right, what about this?
Sweet feed.
This is a textured sweet feed. What do we see in there?
Whole oats.
Good, what else?
And then pellets and a little bit of corn.
Yep, good.
Molasses.
Yep, and it's coated in a good covering of molasses. If you have sweet feeds, you know they're pretty sticky. So, all right, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next one.
Whole corn.
Yep, that's pretty mandatory. Whole corn there. Okay, this is a feed additive. Does anyone have a guess on?
Real quick, I missed, what's number 14? Or what was the one right after the mixed pelleted feed?
Say that one more time. What was your question?
What was the feed right after the mixed pelleted feed?
That was a textured sweet feed there. If you have the list of like of feed samples, it says wheat at it.
What is it? It's wheat something?
Yeah, ignore that. I'm not exactly sure what that is.
Okay.
Urea.
All right, sorry guys, hang on for a second. Guesses on the
Urea.
what was that? Sorry, it's like the volume is a little weird on my computer.
Urea.
No. Any other guesses?
Is it the dicalcium phosphate supplement?
Yeah, it's so it's again, this isn't like something you would see normally like separate, but yeah, it's the diacalcium phosphate, and I can spell that out for you real quick on the there we go. Good. All right, so go ahead and go on to the next one. I can come back to. All right, what are these?
Alfalfa cubes.
Alfalfa cubes.
Yes, alfalfa cubes. You can technically, I think, get Timothy cubes too, but we're calling these alfalfa cubes. Very good. Pretty easy. All right, what about this? This is what I said before we were going to come back to. talking a little bit about the difference.
Wheat bran.
Wheat bran.
Good, wheat bran. So this is like real flaky compared to the rice bran, which is a little bit more like powdery. Again, that's just from the sample and kind of the pictures that I was able to pull up. That seems to be the kind of the difference there. It's also a little more tan. All right. And here's another pellet. Again, kind of what we talked about, slight differences.
Alfalfa pellet.
So I selected this picture because it was a little bit on the darker side. I think also the alfalfa pellet would probably smell a little bit more rich compared to like the Timothy pellet. So again, those would be a little bit difficult to identify side by side, but I guess if you had two side by side and you had to pick, most likely the darker one would be your alfalfa pellet. Okay. All right. Looking at this type of oat, what is this type?
Crimped oats.
Crimped oats. Yep. So you can see if you look closely, there's the tiny little crimp lines. So that's crimped oats. All right. What about this? It is not oats.
Rolled barley.
Yep, rolled barley. Good. So compared to it has a little bit more of a definite, and it's also a different color than the rolled oat. So if you were to look side by side, you can kind of see stuff has a more kind of definite shape to it. They definitely look different sitting next to each other. All right, on to this type. Let me guess.
Extruded pellets.
Yep, good. So this is that Centennial Performance that's Emmy has. And it's an extruded pellet. So the difference between the kind of regulars, whatever pellets versus these is these more like a puff cereal or like a dog food. They're kind of like a puffier pellet. It's not the same as kind of like those packed little tubular pellets. They're usually kind of either shaped or have this kind of puffiness to them. Again, you can kind of think like this, for instance, kind of you could say look a little bit more like a dog food type of thing. And as we talked about before in the Altium, that tiny little kind of different looking pellet, it was like a reddish brown. That would be an extruded pellet within that mixed feed. Good. All right. So we'll move on to the next. So we have two little hay samples. What can anyone tell me what this particular part of hay is?
Yeah.
Timothy seed head.
Yeah, this is the Timothy seed head. So you can see these within your hay. There actually can be other kind of looking seed heads in your hay, but this one where it's kind of the tight packed little tube is the Timothy. See those out in your field, maybe growing. Again, there can be other kind of types of seed heads, so you have to be careful to move up. But this is that kind of like tight packed bunch of seed there. Good. All right. This here again would be hard to identify specifically what type of pellet it would be. But again, if you were to see this at like quiz, you could identify this as pelleted feed. This specifically is Tribute Calm Ultra. But again, look very similar to other different types of seniors and things like that. So I wouldn't say would be expected to know that this is specifically Calm Ultra, but more that it's just a pelleted feed with no other mixes in there, right? It doesn't have any beet pulp or any extruded pellets. They're just a straight normal pellet feed. Okay, and last hay sample, can anyone tell me? It's a little bit difficult. This is kind of chopped up actually.
Alfalfa.
Yes, yes, this is alfalfa. So you can see that there's kind of those delicate little leaves in there. And that's how you can identify the kind of those little leaves, not clover. Clover has a bigger, kind of broader leaf. These are kind of smaller, more delicate leaves that would be within the flakes of your hay. And like I said, this actually is a little bit more chopped up, but I think it kind of showed more of those little leaves than some of the other pictures that I was able to pull up. Okay, does anyone have any questions specifically about any of the samples that I showed on this page, as far as ways to identify what you would be expected to identify? Again, I'll send these out so you guys can go back through, and I actually I'll send a separate thing that has the names of each one, so you can use it to quiz yourself. You could print it out and make them into flashcards. You can find those feeds at your own barn, or go to your feed store, or if you have, like I said, the little feed sample kits that I sent out. Each club should have one. So if you haven't seen it, you can email your DC and ask. If at some meeting you maybe get a chance to see those, so you can get a chance to kind of feel and take a closer look at those. Like I said, the only thing is, and someone pointed out that if you have the hay and feed sample key that I sent out, number 14 is wheat, and I'm not really sure what that was. I don't have my feed sample kit with me, so I can't specifically say what number 14 was supposed to be. But if any of you guys have that, and I'm checking the chat here. So that would be, you can look at those, and I'll try to clarify what that was for those of you that actually have those kits to look at. But again, like I said, if you were to see some of these samples at quiz, I wouldn't think that you would be expected to know specifically the type of brand. You're more looking at, like, this is a pelleted feed, a mixed pelleted feed, a textured sweet feed. Those are easy to pick out because they're kind of sticky and they has a lot of molasses on the outside, and things like that.